first question I really want to ask you is, can you tell me a little bit and us a little bit about your decision to enter politics? And I know it was a tumultuous one from the decision to leave the Legislative Assembly and really push for the creation of the Telangana.
Thank you, Maya. In fact, like millions of young Indians, I too landed up in the US for my formal education. I had already, completed my master's in biotechnology from India. And then subsequently, I also ended up getting a business degree from CUNY, City University of New York. And then I was happily, this was the time when dot-coms were happening. It wasn't the time for, as we call them, startups now. This was the time when we used to call them dot-coms. I was happily working in one of those dot-coms and doing my thing. And then, one thing led to another. There came a time, when my father, who also was the champion, who was the leader, leading the movement for creation of a separate state, had to quit his member of parliament, his seat in parliament. And it became sort of a life or death battle, where his win was something that would really define and decide the future course of that democratic agitation. So this was a time when he was appealing to the youngsters in my state, to rally with him. It seemed a bit, logical and also possibly, also I think just to jump in. And I did leave my job, a very cushy job actually, and ensured that I joined him. And I didn't tell him, like any father, he would shout at me. So I didn't tell him. I just jumped in, and this was about 19 years ago, in 2006. I think next year would be 2 decades. Do I have regrets about doing this? Once in a while I do, because, politics is a very murky, very interesting kind of field, where you get, a lot of things, you have both bouquets and brickbats. You have to have the equanimity to handle both. But at the end of the day, if you ask me, was it a right call? I would say absolutely yes, because I think what comes with this position of being in public life, whether you are in government or in opposition, is that immense satisfaction, especially in a growing country, of being able to affect change. And that's something nothing can take away. So yes, mostly it was that, decision that really propelled me into this. Thank you.
So we've already heard from you what an incredible success Telangana has been, but I'd like to ask you a little bit about the origin of that success. So right after you served in several ministerial capacities in Telangana, but one was as IT minister, it was ranked by Niti Aayog as the #1 state for the ease of doing business. And that's a really incredible accomplishment for such a young state. And you mentioned the sort of history of maybe, that a new state was a part of the success, perhaps, because you had a lot of passion, a lot of purpose that was built into the very starting moment. But many people here are from other parts of India, maybe even from Bangalore. And they would so for when you think about what is transferable from the experience of what were the key decisions, the 1 or 2 things that you think are really key that other Indian states should learn from when it comes to what Telangana got right about the ease of doing business?
The most interesting and most heartening thing about India is, India is not a homogeneous country. We are very, very, you lived there for a bit, you worked in India as well, you'd know it. It's a very diverse country. Everything changes in India every 200 kilometers. The language, the dialect, the culture, the cuisine. I think even probably the politics. So therefore, I think what needs to come about, or what needs to happen really, if you ask me, is the cohesion that is supposed to bring Indian states together. The cohesive force. Where we learn from each other, where we don't have to reinvent the wheel. That is something that is, I believe, truly missing right now in India. So I would say 2 things. If other states have to emulate and grow and really not leapfrog but pole vault into the next league, I'd say 2 things. 1, leadership, passionate leadership, which is bent on effecting change in the time span that's given to us. And 2, of course, with all the diversity, with all the disconnect that there is between Indian states, I think Government of India playing a role of ensuring the role of a big brother, where you would actually possibly do a SWOT analysis by state and say, you're good at this, stick to this, you're good at this, please do this. And then so there's no stepping on each other's toes, then there's no bickering of sorts in between the states, but learning from each other, working in a complementary fashion. We use this word federalism very, very loosely in India. So cooperative federalism is what should be the order of the day. Nothing else, that'll take us away from that. Yeah, because stronger the states, stronger the country.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So central coordination was not one of the answers I thought that you were going to come up with when I asked you that question. So let me ask you just about how you think also India's north-south tensions, if I can use that word, are going to play out, given that the South, the 5 big southern states, punch above their weight economically. They're 20% of the population by some counts, or 40% of the economic production for some of the reasons you've highlighted here. One of the things we know is coming up is the redistricting, and that at the national level. And you yourself have called for redistricting to be done in accordance with that sort of some of the economic contributions of states rather than by population. So how do you see some of the politics of what is, it's not a divide, but every country has these tensions. China has these tensions at formative moments. The United States has had these tensions because you often have regional differences in what economies do. So do you think of that? How do you think about the politics of that playing out in the next decade?
Well, I don't agree that there is a divide of sorts between the South and the North. Of course, South has progressed well, has done probably far better than the rest of India. Like you said, 19% of India contributing to almost 38% of India's GDP is a significant number without a question. But end of the day, I think all of us cutting across different parts of India are Indians first, especially, and we all work under the larger rubric of India. It is our Indianness that really brings us together, that really keeps us together, that really binds us together. Yes, like every family, we do have our issues. I'm sure like every other family, even with 4 members or 5 members or even a larger family, I think how family sits and resolves its issues. I'd say the topic of discussion, the topic of contention right now is redrawing the boundaries of the Lok Sabha seats within the states and within the country. Now, that is going to be a point of discussion and debate and a lot of dissent as well. Because, democracy is about these 3 Ds, discuss, debate, and dissent, right? Mm-hmm. So we are raising our voice and we are saying, you don't have... There was a time, Maya, if you remember, in late 70s and 80s, where population was considered a bane. Mm-hmm. Population was considered something of a menace which needs to be curbed and controlled, and therefore governments have brought in these measures called family planning, etc., etc. The South actually effectively implemented family planning, and therefore population has actually come down in the South, whereas in the northern part of India and also several other pockets, population continued to grow. Mm-hmm. So today, if you were to go by the latest population numbers for delimitation and redrawing the boundaries of parliament seats, it would be a travesty of justice. Effectively, what it would mean is you would be punishing those states that have done well in the larger interest of the country, and you would be rewarding those who actually haven't followed or adhered to the government of India's dictum. Mm-hmm. So therefore, we came out with a radical proposal saying, Telangana is a state which is about 2.5% of India in terms of population, but we contribute to 5% of India's GDP. So if you were to draw boundaries, redraw boundaries, then why don't you actually use GDP as a measure? Of course, that did not go very well, with the party in power in Delhi now, but I'm not going to make a huge fuss about it, because I'm sure we'll get more opportunities in India to debate, to basically discuss with them. And I think Oxford India Forum probably is not the place where I would see, this being resolved ASAP. So yes, it is an issue, but I do believe there are several things that need to be addressed before we get to that point. Yeah.
So one more question, and then I'll rely on Siddharth to tell me whether we have time for questions from all of you. One of the things we teach at our School of Government every year, in which we have a very hefty representation of Indian students, including one that's here, is that you need to develop political priorities, and having a big list of priorities actually means having no priorities, because to prioritize means to choose the 1 or 2 things that are really important for you to focus on. And that it's that political will, it allows that political will and purpose to focus on 1 or 2 things. So my last question to you is, in a future in which you were chief minister, what would your 1 or 2 priorities be for Telangana going forward?
I think, without economic growth, without growing your economy, you would not be able to accomplish, any kind of objective that you may have for yourself. So I would say the first and foremost priority would be continuous economic growth and economic expansion, creation of wealth. And I think parallelly, I think a country like India, you cannot be oblivious to the fact that there is a huge population which basically needs support and, the vulnerable section in the country, which needs a bit of handholding. So I'd say continue to push the economic agenda, continue to create jobs, continue to attract investments, continue to, create wealth, parallelly ensure that you take care of the most vulnerable. So I'd say a fine balance of welfare and economic growth is what we've seen in Telangana, and I think that has worked brilliantly. And, we are not the West, we are not the UK or the US to be completely oblivious, to be completely ignorant of the asks, of the demands, of the population which is really yearning and which is really wanting a certain upliftment in terms of standards. So of course, healthcare, education would be priorities, but I would say you need economic growth to fund them. You need economic growth to make these happen, to effect this change. So a good combo of economics and welfare is what I would say.
Great. 2 questions, I'm told. Oh, that's a tough. All right. I know that you've already asked a question, so let me start there. Yes, please.
Mr. Rao, youth political participation and in India is definitely skewed, and Telangana is not alien to the entire concept. But in your political experience, both as a mentor and a sponsor, have you had an opportunity to mentor young women to get into politics? And if you have, what are the bottlenecks that you think women face and how they can change their entire discourse?
Like every other field, like Preeta was asked the same question as well, like every other field, women do have challenges without a question. But I think that's set to change now with the reservation that has already been passed, legislated. I think that is really going to be a game changer for our country. And 1/3 is obviously by default, it is something that no party or no leader or no state has to, make it happen now. But if we are able to go beyond that 1/3, and if we're able to possibly push for 40%, I think most certainly I believe, in fact, Preeta was probably being a bit, probably holding back, I'd say. I can say this more openly. I think women do a lot of things better. You're more organized. You're probably a lot more focused. So I think India will see not just leapfrogging, but pole vaulting in the next decade after women start participating and women start becoming lawmakers and becoming change makers. So yes, we are going to witness that in our lifetime. Somebody said, will I see this in this lifetime? I do believe it is going to happen in our lifetime. I'm 48 now, so I'd probably be around for another 25 years. So most certainly, I hope I'll see that in my lifetime. Thank you.
One more question. Yes.
So when it comes to this 9 billion distributed in, probably farmers' account, okay. So what is the actual impact, okay? Because, when you give someone certain fund and you do not, probably educate them how to use this fund, because the money will get over someday, okay? So when it comes to how successful was that scheme when you are actually depositing the money directly to the farmers?
There are 2 styles of thinking when it comes to this. There is this conservative thinking that you need to possibly not give money, but probably give them seeds or fertilizers or probably some sort of a input that really goes into agriculture. Then there is the other line of thought that, trust the farmer. Give it to them and leave it to them to decide on what will they actually be spending. And we chose the latter. The reason why I say this is because, what is economy? Ultimately, what is economic growth? It is the role of a rupee or a role of a dollar or a role of a pound. So as long as you're empowering your citizens, as long as you're empowering your state to make investments into capital infrastructure, and that's exactly why Telangana has moved from rank 14 in per capita to rank 1 in a span of 10 years. That's exactly why Telangana, which was only producing about 68 lakh metric tons of paddy in 2014, has been able to produce 3 crore tons of paddy in 2023. Trust your people. Trust your instincts. Trust your people. And that's what we've done. It worked. If you ask me, was there no deviation from the purpose? Probably there was, to an extent. I would not be able to quantify in terms of percentage. But by and large, was it successful? I'd say it's probably the most successful thing that we've done by depositing $9 billion into 7 million farmers' accounts and have changed the landscape, have changed the future of Telangana's agriculture for good. I think that's a fantastic feat, if you ask me.
So, trust between politicians and citizens, I think, is an excellent note to end on. Please join me in thanking a really wonderfully frank discussion with KT Rama Rao.